This is the Mobile Tech Podcast, brought to you by worldpodcasts.com. Now here's your host, Tech Girl, Miriam Joie.
Brought to you by Mint Mobile. Stay tuned for a special offer at the end of the show. Hi, and welcome to the Mobile Tech Podcast. I'm your host, Miriam Joie, and today is Thursday, May 16, 2024, and I've got the lovely Judy Stanford here with me of Gear Diary. Hi, Judy. How are you?
Hi, Miriam. I'm well. Hope you're well. I hear you had a little not fun when you're traveling issue come up.
Yeah, sometimes you get a little cranky when you travel, and that's basically what's going on. In case you're wondering, folks, I am in Göteborg, Sweden right now, and that's why I'm in a different space, in a hotel room. And look, it's 10:05 p.m., and it's still kind of bluish outside. So, Judy, lots of stuff happened this week. Mostly a bunch of new phones that are not necessarily super relevant to North America, but as you know, my audience is very global, so I want to kind of cover some of that. But first, Google I/O, we have to talk about it. I regret to say to my audience, I was invited, I accepted the invite, but because of my travel schedule, the best I could have done is attend 1 hour of the keynote before I had to fly out. So I chose, the hassle of having to get up early, driving to Mountain View, getting my badge and sitting just for 1 hour, half of the keynote, and then immediately coming back to the airport was not going to happen. So I regret to inform that. And I want to apologize to the Google folks if they're listening. Yeah, it just schedule changed. But, at the same time, my Pixel 8a is sitting on my desk in San Francisco right now because it arrived literally 2 hours after I left. And so I'll let you know next week, or whenever I get a chance to play with it, it should be next week, what I think of it. But Google I/O, of course, it was AI and Gemini. I think somebody counted the instances and it was ridiculous.
It was.
But what I want to know from you is what is your vibe about it? How do you feel? Are you on a scale from 1 to 10?
Okay. So let me preface by saying that I think there is a lot of value in AI, and we use it all the time and don't even realize how it's working for us. And
Right.
I think that's wonderful. My biggest issue is, as a webmaster, a web owner, a site owner, that with Google rolling out, we'll start with the web part, okay? With Google rolling out AI summary for everyone, I've been using it, I guess, in beta for a few months. And I do find that it a lot of times answers my question, and it'll say the site that the answer came from, but you don't have to go to the site anymore. So it seems a little self-defeating to Google's ad model and to getting the relevant stuff for them to pull their AI answers from, that we're basically being cut out of the loop now. We'll produce the content, we'll do all of that, but nobody has to click through. And if they don't click through, we don't get paid. Google doesn't get paid. So I'm not sure yet how this is beneficial for anybody except for, admittedly, the person doing the search who just wants a quick answer.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's a problem. I think there are so many things they announced. We should go through them. But I think in general, my vibe on generative AI is very conflicted. I want to give the audience an idea of what I've been able to do with it, because there's some good stuff. For example, summarizing things. You know how when you write a review, sometimes you need to write a little summary at the top. Well, generative AI generally gets it right. And because I can fact check it because I wrote the review, right?
Right.
And I give it the review to look at so that it can summarize it. It actually works out pretty well most of the time. Also kind of creating SEO, friendly headlines. I'm not very good as a human at that. So, my editors will obviously have final say, you being one of them. But the thing that's funny is that I would rather give them something that they will go with, because it's both punchy and SEO friendly. And I found that generative AI has done a pretty decent job for me so far. The other thing that's been really helpful for me is very basic generative fill in photos. So, I take product photos all the time. I usually shoot them 4:3, but every now and then I need a thumbnail that's 16:9. And if I start cropping, I'm going to lose part of the product. So I use generative fill to just extend the background that's already blurry because I'm using, a shallow depth of field. And so that actually, these are 3 use cases where I cannot argue that generative AI is useful for me.
Sure.
And the rest of it, though, like I have the Rabbit R1, I have, heard all the horrible stories behind the humane pin, and you have too, and we've covered this on the show extensively. But I am not impressed at all with the fact that every time I ask it a question, I have to check the answer. It kind of defeats the purpose. And look,
Completely.
I know that it'll evolve, and probably improve, but I'm still, again, very conflicted simply because I'm like I want to believe that AI could be useful, but I'm also, not finding that right now. And then it's causing, I think, so much harm too, right? Like for the artists that had their content scraped,
Yes.
so that these AI can do Mid-Journey and whatever. Like
Yes.
for us, the
For writers who are having
who've
theirs,
had
yes.
all our stuff scraped,
Yeah.
At the same time, look, I kind of understand everything's a remix, right? Everything is ultimately a remix, right?
Sure.
Like sampling when it started, people didn't get attribution or money from it. And eventually that got resolved. And I would never say, as a musician myself, that you shouldn't sample stuff, because some of the best music I know has some really great use of remixing,
Absolutely.
reworking of samples of other music. So like, you could argue that when we write reviews, when we started as little baby creator writer people, like
Yes.
you could argue that we read, like for me, Engadget was my big inspiration back in the day.
Oh, sure.
And that's how I ended up writing my blog, with that kind of same general style. And that's also why Engadget hired me, because I had their voice,
right.
And I think in a way, like us humans reading something and being, oh, this is cool, I want to do something like that, to some extent is we're doing what generative AI is doing. Like we're kind of, but I think that the problem is the scale. Like we read one story, maybe 10 stories a day, and we do that for months on end, and we influence our style from that. But here, hundreds of thousands of stories are being ingested a second,
Right.
I don't know, I'm making that up, but like, that's the part.
It's probably more, Miriam. It's probably more.
That's the part that tweaks me. Like, so
Well,
I don't
and
know.
I mean, even when maybe you were perfecting your style and using Engadget as your inspiration, think back to like earlier website days, right? If you took a quote from somewhere, you immediately gave them a link. So if somebody wanted to dig deeper into it, they had a way immediately to click that link, open up a new window or a new tab, and go check it out at the source.
Yeah.
And it seemed a little more credited, if that makes sense.
No, I agree with you.
Versus now, you'll get a list of like 8 maybe, just making up random number here, but it'll give you this AI generated thing at the top of the page. And there are like, these windows that you can click underneath it that'll take you to articles, but you don't know exactly which one said which.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It just seems, I know it's early days and I know it's growing pains. I just want to make sure that original artists, original writers, original content creators are getting the credit that they deserve and the payment that they deserve. And right now, I don't see how it's going to work.
And that's my biggest gripe right now.
Yeah.
And so going back to Google I/O, I'm not surprised. Like on one hand, I hope that once I start using those new tools, I'm more impressed with what I get out of them.
Mm-hmm.
Because, as I said, Rabbit R1 and Humane have not really impressed me so far.
Well, both of those, I mean, especially Rabbit, it should have been an app, right? I mean, you didn't need to buy another $200 piece of equipment to carry around with you.
Yeah, I think we have tried it and cared about it, and they've gotten the kind of coverage they did if it wasn't hardware. I agree with you, but at the same time, I'm kind of like, I dig the idea that like of a device, in my opinion, should be like meta glasses.
Yeah,
or something.
Absolutely.
Like
absolutely.
that. I dig the idea of a device that can do some stuff that you don't want to pull out your phone for, but you still have your phone nearby and you can still use it, right? But at the same time, the other thing that I'm struggling with here is like, we're like 15 days away from Apple's AI all the things conference, right? Like Google just
everything
did.
now
And,
is AI, all the things, and it's
and
just
so
like
I'm excited to compare and see how they both evolve because
Mhm.
obviously, I think Rabbit and Humane will take a lot longer to get to where they want to be.
yeah,
But I think Google and Apple have better resources for that.
yeah,
So I'm a little more optimistic and positive. And so that's why, I went into this Google I/O both rolling my eyes because I knew it was going to be AI, all the things, but at the same time being like, okay, I'm trying to be positive and hopeful that we're going to see some better use cases. And so, you saw the little Verge link. I'm going to put in the show notes for you, the folks here in the audience. But there's a little recap the Verge did, and of course, there's
are
like
you talking about the holiday booking?
yeah, well, I mean, so the one that's got me excited is the Flash version of Gemini, which
Mhm.
probably will fit on a device.
Mhm.
Like, so you can do AI without connectivity, right?
Yes.
Kind of like GPT 4.0, which we're going to talk
Mhm.
about a little bit later. That's another thing that was announced. I think OpenAI was like, oh, let's preempt everyone else with more AI, all the things.
Right.
So yeah, so I think that's cool.
The
But the thing
scam call
about
detection they're talking about. I mean,
no,
there's a
that
good use.
stuff exactly. Like you talked about like the redesigning search stuff. That really concerns me because, as you know, as somebody who runs a website, it's like it's already rough enough with all the SEO stuff. Never mind when AI gets a hold of that. Like that's going to change the revenue model for everyone
Oh my
yet
gosh. Okay, I'm
again.
going to say something. I'm going to
Go
say
for it.
something.
Go for
There
it.
was a time in the early days when I was writing with Julie Strudelmeyer at the Gadgeteer, and Google was new. And, we had used all these different search engines, and there came a point where we were just like, use Google, it's better. Google is my friend. We used to say that to each other. Google is my
Yes,
friend.
we did.
And then in like 2012, it started to be, why is Google not a good friend anymore? What's going on?
Exactly.
And it's like, and it
No,
just
I
keeps
remember
getting
that.
worse and worse. Why? It's like, I want to love Google because I have such good feelings towards the early days, if that makes sense, the do no harm days. But I
Yeah.
feel like harm is being done left and right now. And it's concerning, I mean, here's the thing. They keep making it where it's harder and harder for sites to stay open. What are they going to be pulling all their answers from? Is it just going to be corporate stuff that can afford to stay open and doesn't necessarily rely on, ad money or, things like that? It's like, what's the end game here? I don't know. I hate to just go on about this, but it's just, I feel that there's got to be a way for them to make answers easier for people who are looking for them, but also not take away from the sites that are producing the answers that they're pulling from. So
Yeah, I for a long time believed Google was on the right path ethically as a company, and that's clearly changed a while back. And I'm still upset about that because part of the
me
reason
too.
I chose Google as my one of my main tools and back in the day was for two reasons. Because it's cross-platform, it's platform agnostic. You can run it on
Yes.
anything. If you have a web browser, you can use Google. And everything has a web browser, including lawnmowers now. Like I'm joking, but did you ever see the
No, they do. You
running
can play
Doom on
Doom. Yes. On that I'm going to say it wrong. Husqvarna.
yeah, the Husqvarna, yeah. We
Thank
saw that
you.
at
Yeah.
CES, right? But my
Yeah.
point is, it's like at the same time, I'm like, I like them because they just adopted a lot of open technologies and they just like, they had that motto, don't do evil. And they stuck with that for a long time. And then it all went downhill. And as a leader in the field, I don't think they would have like slid, in terms of their business by continuing that approach. Like I don't know what happened and how and who got greedy and where and when, but it's
Right.
just the same kind of like rinse and repeat story coming out of Silicon Valley. I just had a conversation with some other journalists on this trip here on the train today, and I'm like, it really sucks. Silicon Valley was when I moved there in early 2000, it was such a hopeful place. Like we were just a bunch of nerds and we're trying to do
Sure.
cool stuff, and money wasn't what was important to us. And, clearly we were bad at money because, Silicon Valley the whole .com crashed pretty hard, right? But at the same time, the people who were making money back then, when I first moved to San Francisco, what really impressed me was how people with money poured it right back into the community. They
Right.
they donated to shelters. They donated
Right.
to nonprofits. They donated to weird art projects, to
Absolutely.
support their artist friends that they hung out with and went to Burning Man with. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yes.
that was what it was about. And if you look historically, that's what San Francisco's always been about. And I
Sure.
know
But
San
now
Francisco
it's
is
how big is your house and what kind of car are you driving?
Exactly. And I know San Francisco is not all of Silicon Valley, but like, come on, it is the heart of it, like the soul and the heart. And now it's not like that. It's like all I see is these young people who literally come here, or in San Francisco because I'm in Sweden, but they come to San Francisco because they want to make money. And I know not everybody's like that. I know there's still some idealistic nerds out there, but the vast majority just, they have no interest in local anything. And then with COVID, where we all got more isolated, it's been hard to go back out there and be social. I think they don't find any reason to do that. And so because they're not active in their community, they don't see the need to support their community. And I know we're having a tech podcast, folks. I'll come right back to Google I in a second. But I think
you guys, literally, it's all connected. It is all connected.
Yeah. A lot of what I'm talking about, we're seeing I think Web 2.0, when Facebook was the thing just before the iPhone there, that's when things got sour. And I think it's because the people with money from the East Coast, like the banking people and the Wall Street people, and especially people from Ivy Leagues, were like, hey, we can make money on this tech stuff. We just need to manage those nerds a little better. But then they
manage those nerds.
Then they hoarded all the money. They're not spending it. Like, even look at Apple, right? Apple as a company is sitting on so much cash. What are you doing with that money? Like, not even mentioning the billionaires here, needless to say, right? Like, it's just weird to me that we've kind of lost this, like, back in the Renaissance, right?
Yeah.
They supported Da Vinci and the artists and the scientists and the creators with money. That's how you made a living as a creative person. And
now they're flying themselves to outer space. It's like, be a Medici, not a Bezos or Bezos.
Yeah, whatever. Exactly. Anyway, rant over. So I am a little concerned with what they're going to do with search. But I do think that Ask Photos is cool. I think that the spam detection is pretty cool.
Yes.
The being able to fit an entire smaller LLM into local processing, edge computing is really cool. So, and of course, they didn't talk much about Android 15 at the keynote. I think the next day they might have during the developer keynote. But the reality is, it's weird. It was a weird I/O for me. Like, I wasn't there, but I watched some of it. And I feel like normally they at least hint at some hardware. You'd think they would have at least mentioned in passing, hey, this new miniaturized edge compute model Gemini version can run on the Pixel 8a. Like, they didn't even mention the Pixel 8a. It's like they launched a Pixel 8a 3 days ago, or whatever it was, a week ago. Yeah. And they're like, not a single mention of it at Google I/O, it feels like. It's so bizarre.
That is weird. I mean, it seems like they would have been a little more phone-centric since they just released this phone, right? So
that's what I'm saying. So there are some good things in there. Like, it looks like Wear OS 5 is going to be better with battery life on smartwatches. And I just feel like they could have been more balanced in their content. They do so much stuff as a company. And, I've heard some people say to me, well, Miriam, it's a developer conference. And I'm like, so what? Like, I used to be a developer. And, when I went to a developer conference and a company that I worked with announced that they were making some new hardware, I got excited because, as a developer, it's a new platform. Like, I don't think the two are mutually exclusive. Like, I think that just because they didn't talk about hardware doesn't mean that, it's because it's a developer conference. Come on. Like, Apple, I don't think there's been a single WWDC that Apple didn't at least announce one product.
Right.
So
that is an interesting omission. And
it's weird.
I guess that Rabbit and Humane should be glad that they didn't say, oh, and we're releasing this new artificial intelligence device where you don't have to bring your phone, and it has its own, all-day battery. And
well, don't
So I
worry,
guess-
because Meta still hasn't had their conference yet.
right. Well,
And
Meta
they've done
would
some
be
cool
the one to
stuff.
do it. Yeah.
Yeah, they've done some cool stuff with the Ray-Ban. So
Definitely.
let's move on to Android 15 a little bit. Like, you
Okay.
just installed it on your Pixel
I
Fold.
mean, like literally an hour ago. So it's like I can't even tell you about anything new. And I had mentioned to you, I was kind of surprised that it didn't, have a pop-up going, here's what it can do now. But it's, the beta, whatever. And I guess we're going to find out soon. And I'll have to dig into it and see. But I don't know.
So this is cool, because I'd love to, like, maybe in a few days you can let me know what you think of these few things
Of
here.
course.
So there are 8 features. I'm going to repost this great story by Max
Yeah.
over at ZDNet, where he summarized like 8 of the new features that are coming, so that, we kind of know what to look for now, since there's no tutorial, or at least maybe in this beta, there's no tutorial.
Maybe. Yeah.
So the first one looks like a private space. So it looks like you can kind of lock away apps and content behind, some sort of authentication, which, a lot of Chinese phones have done before. Like, I don't know if you've seen this on Chinese phones, but a lot of them let you put apps in a vault that nobody can access unless they can
A
authenticate.
sandbox.
So yeah,
Like
in
all
addition
alone.
to
Yes.
logging into your phone, like
You have to log into
authenticating
this
or-
private space.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay. So is this
Yeah.
where people are going to hide Bumble and Grindr and all the other apps? Is that what this is for? What is this for? Or banking apps? I guess it'd be good for
I
that.
don't know. I think I can see one use case where if you hand your phone to your kids on a regular basis,
Yeah.
and there are kid-friendly tools where you can put the phone in kid mode, but it's very convoluted. So having that
Yeah.
extra layer, I think might be helpful. That's one of my gut use cases. And anything that gives you options for privacy and security, I'm not against.
Sure.
Like, I mean, I'm not like, I don't think I'm going to use any of this, but so
Yeah. Well, let's face it, Miriam, everything you and I have is like, it's all out there.
Yeah,
I
it
mean, yeah, it's like, what can we keep private anymore? But I don't know. This kind of also reminds me of that phone at CES. It was
Yeah.
a punked phone that was kind of
Oh,
running
yeah.
a sandbox. Remember what I'm
oh
talking about?
yeah.
can't
So
think of
I
the name.
had apostrophe. So I
cannot
had
think of- apostrophe.
I had
Thank
the
you.
CEO apostrophe as a guest on the podcast a while back.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's
It
kind of
kind of reminds me of a similar type situation where it's kind of like you have 2 phones. This one does this stuff and it's very private and locked down. And then this side is like okay, here's what I'm doing over here. And I'm not worried about it being so private. So it'll be interesting to see how this shakes out. But is this something that third-party apps are going to have to build into their app, or will the phone do it for them automatically?
I
That's
don't
what
know.
I wasn't sure about. So
I guess we'll
see.
I don't think it's going to require developer support
Okay.
based on what I've seen on Chinese phones. So
Very
let's
good.
see. Let's go through these pretty quick, because I want to
Yeah.
move on to some more exciting news. Let's see. So we've got better experience on bigger screens. I mean, Google's promised this for years, and it's getting better, but it's really slow. So hopefully this will be another step in the right direction, right?
Yeah.
More stuff in your Google Wallet. Well, I think they're just copying Apple here.
I think so
Right.
too. But anything
Like-
that makes it easier to integrate is great, because Apple Wallet does, to me, have the edge right now.
For sure.
And it's like, it's so easy to make sure that things are in your wallet there, where on Google, it's been a while coming where you could more easily do this. Some things have started to like integrate where they will allow you to slap it in the wallet, but it just isn't as easy. So I'm
Yeah.
here for anything that makes it easier.
Yeah, so we're looking at library cards, movie tickets,
Driver's license in some
driver's
states,
license in some states. Yeah,
like 4 of them. I mean,
yeah. Right now, it's pretty limited.
yeah,
Okay, thieves will have a tougher time stealing your phone. I guess they're gonna.
theft detection lock.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, they're following in Apple's footsteps again, which I think
But I
is
mean,
cool.
couldn't you already, if your phone was stolen, you could go to, I can't remember what it was, but you could like lock your phone or wipe your phone. So
Yeah,
It kind of feels like maybe an extension to some
this
degree.
basically is kind of like, this thing that was happening to Apple users where people were like memorizing and them typing in their code, then stealing their phones, and then they had access to everything.
Right.
And then they could disable some of these security features before it was too late. And so I think this is kind of addressing the same problem here.
Sure.
More secure phone calls. All right, so better.
This is using the AI, right, to screen a little bit better and like pop up a thing if it says, "Oh, this might be a scam call. They're asking you to move money or whatever."
Oh, this is cool. One of the things I really love about being a Pixel user is all these call screening and call management features.
That is what makes it so hard to leave a Pixel because
100%.
I mean that call scam protection, and also in text, it seems best on a Pixel. And the call protection is like being able to screen call. Oh my God. Yeah, it's hard to give that up.
And things like hold for me or whatever.
Oh yeah.
I think is cool too.
When you're like calling some big company and you're just like going to sit there for forever. Yes.
All right. Slight performance improvements.
Performance jumps. Yeah.
That's always a welcome thing.
Yes.
Let's see what else do we have. AR and Google Maps. We've already had that in Google
I was going to
Maps,
say we had. I mean, Google Maps was really like the first, wasn't it? I don't think Apple Maps is anything even close. Where you could like Street View and it would like augmented reality take you exactly where you wanted to go, or to find a friend or something like that. So I guess they're just refining it.
This is, I think, looking at like monuments and telling you about them using AI.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying?
Then
yeah.
Maybe that'll be really interesting.
I mean, you know how like you can get a guided tour in some cities by scanning the barcodes at different locations, and it tells you a bit of the history. That's kind of the same deal, but with Google Maps,
Okay.
I guess. Integration with third-party trackers, Find My. That's actually, I thought that was announced a few weeks ago. We talked about it on the podcast.
Yeah. I feel like that was something that they had said they'd let you know, like if other trackers were near you. I guess we'll see.
Yeah, no, I think that's part of it. But I think the other part is that they're partnering with companies like Chipolo and Pebblebee who make trackers.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Okay. I think those are the 8.
Yeah. And so it'll be out in August.
Yeah. Expect to be bedazzled very soon.
Well, we'll see.
Speaking of which, so you have the beta on your Pixel Fold. The beta is also available for OnePlus 12, OnePlus Open.
Yes.
I think maybe 12R even. I think Nothing as well. I'll put the link in the show notes. So yeah, folks, basically, I think if you want to try out Android 15, you're going to have a bunch of options. Check the link in the show notes there. I know for sure OnePlus, Google, and Nothing. And there might be more, maybe Samsung. I have to check. But it's good news. I wouldn't recommend you don't use your own daily driver phone for this.
Yeah.
Right? Like, just, I know you might not have 2 phones, but if you don't, I recommend just, buy a cheap Pixel 7a. Like right now it's on sale for like nothing. Try that out because, or OnePlus 12R or something, because you don't want to, leave all of your important stuff to the guessing game that is a beta.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something like your alarms won't work anymore, some random glitch, and, things you really rely on. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's really bad. What I'm really excited about, though, is that now we've got a bunch of hardware to talk about. And more importantly, you're, like me, a big fan of the Xperia phones, right?
Yes.
And so Sony announced a new Xperia phone. There's been rumors for weeks now. The Xperia 1 Mark VI is out. And as you'd expect, it's everything and the kitchen sink with Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 and an improved camera system. And what's really interesting, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, is that it doesn't have the 21:9 aspect ratio anymore. Now it's more like a standard smartphone in terms of shape.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, it's been a little while since I had an Xperia, and for a long time, though, they were my favorite smartphones. And this one, I mean, other than the fact that the camera array looks boring to me, I'm sure they're fantastic cameras, but I'm just like, oh, it's so Samsung.
It's a little,
yeah.
But no, to be fair, it's very similar to their previous one. So
Yeah.
Like, if you go back to looking at the Z Fold series, it looks kind of like that too. But that was Samsung did it after Sony. So
Yeah.
I'm giving that one to Sony. So yeah, so it's interesting because they've switched to a 19.5 by 9 aspect ratio, and it's not like a 4K display like before. It's a 1080p panel this time. So interesting, but it's probably much brighter. Yeah, it's much brighter. That was always one of the Achilles heel of the.
And it should be maybe a little less expensive than some of the other models, possibly. I mean, they're always so expensive. Yeah.
I mean, that I'm not expecting at all, because I always feel like the thing is, for me, I kind of feel like Sony can afford to, pardon the pun, like, because they were talking about money, but they can afford to be like niche. Like, they can afford to be like, you want our phones. They're very special. They're very different. You know what you're buying. It's like,
right.
That's the kind of confidence that I admire. It's like, Xiaomi.
And you're going to pay for it.
Yeah. Xiaomi makes the 14 Ultra, and it's also like 1,500 euros or something. And is it worth it? 100%. If you're into photography, and I think it's going to be the same here, like,
sure.
I'm hoping there is more not AI, but computational photography features baked into the auto mode on this phone, because that's always what's been kind of lacking on Sony phones. But I mean, you still get a headphone jack, you still get wireless charging, you still get like a super thin, super sexy phone. It's just so hot,
and they come in green.
Yeah, and look, I love that in the entire world of smartphones, what does Sony do? Sony goes, screw you all. We're going to give you top and bottom bezels, because we're going to put the speakers there and the front-facing camera there. We have no apologies and no regrets.
And you're going to like it.
Exactly. And I kind of dig that. It's like they're not copying too much. They're just doing their thing.
Sure.
It takes guts to do that,
Well, Sony's got guts. And if you're interested in guts, you're going to want to look at the new Xperia.
100%. So the main camera is unchanged, it looks like. And then, the telephoto has been improved a little bit, it looks like. So it's the same sensor, but you now have more zoom, right? So you can go 3.5x all the way to 7.1x. And before that, it was a bit less than that. So I think it was 5x it topped off at. So that's cool. Yeah. And of course, you get the same ultra wide as well. And it's Zeiss T-Star. The T-Star is nice because they coat the lenses and the inside of the optics, like, so they can minimize the reflections.
The glare,
so the lens flare you get on an iPhone, you're not going to get as much of that here, which is kind of cool.
I mean, Sony makes excellent cameras, so it only stands to reason that their phones would be, thoughtful of all of the things a photographer needs to.
And here's another thing that Sony just like, whatever, we're going to do our own thing, is fingerprint sensor on the power lock key. They could put it on the display because it's an OLED, but they're like, no, we don't want to do that.
I prefer a physical fingerprint. So that's good.
I don't mind. It just seems so, what's the word, like retro almost at this point for a flagship,
Right.
Yeah, which is just kind of interesting. Anyway, so folks, this is going to be available globally, and go nuts if that's your thing. I'm going to try to get myself a review unit. I did last year with the Mark V. I really enjoyed it, and would I recommend it as my main phone? Probably not. But if you have the money to spend and you want that...
You can't say that without saying why you wouldn't recommend it as your main phone.
Well, I was going to say, so the reason I think you should consider it is if you're really invested in Sony Alpha cameras, you get a very similar experience with this camera system. So, that is something to definitely look out for, I think. And it's one of the unique selling points of this phone, right? Basically.
Definitely.
So next week, like, I'm in Sweden right now. And if I survive this trip, I will be in Dubai next week for POCO. POCO is going to announce the F6 series on May 23rd, and they've revealed the design, which is surprising because not that they did reveal it, but that the design is actually different than what we expected it to be. Because here's the thing you have to understand, and Judy, you know this intuitively.
I don't know about that.
Chinese phones, like, look, BBK Group, right? Like, so there's a lot of OnePlus, Oppo, phones that are similar, right?
Sure.
Oppo, OnePlus.
Absolutely.
And Realme,
Absolutely.
you know Realme, same thing. Like, they're
Very
kind of
much.
part spinning, right? You know
Yeah.
who invented that? Xiaomi invented that. Xiaomi was the first because they did Redmi before
Mhm.
BBK did. I mean, technically BBK did OnePlus first, but that was not
But they weren't
quite
really
as
sharing as
like
many parts at that time, right? I mean,
exactly.
it wasn't until
And
they combined the research and development where you
you
really
got it.
saw,
And
Oppo
Redmi,
and yeah.
yeah, Redmi was more like we're trying a new brand that's more affordable for India. And that's why BBK countered with Realme.
Right.
But then here's the other thing. Then Poco came out. The Poco phone F1 came out a few years back. And it was like basically the playbook was 1+1, right?
Mhm.
Like that level of like flagship for as little money as you can.
Right.
And it was quite clever. But we didn't think anything was to come out of it beyond that. And then one day they decided, let's make that a brand, not just one phone model. So they did. And now we have Poco. And here's the thing. Poco and Redmi phones are almost twins. There's many that are just slightly variations. So recently, Redmi launched the K70 series, and we thought it's going to be the F6. But no, industrial design, while it looks like they're unique. Woo! So
they're throwing us a curveball.
yeah, should you be excited about that? Maybe. I'm just excited because every time I review a Poco or Redmi phone, you get a lot of bang for your buck. And they might not be the best phones out there, but damn. And, if you know how good Xiaomi is with their camera system stuff, imagine that trickling down, like tuned down a little bit, but,
Sure.
it's really good. Like I have high hopes for this. I have the previous Poco, the X6 Pro, and I've used it. It's got a Dimensity 8300. Which is like the second best chip that MediaTek makes.
Mhm.
And it whips the llama's ass, if you know my reference to Winamp here. It's a good phone for the money. So let's see what happened in Dubai next week, folks. I'll definitely have a summary of what goes on. I will actually be doing a podcast with a person in Dubai who's a colleague who's attending the conference. You probably all have heard of Sam Byford, who used to write at The Verge. He's based in Japan. He's going to be my guest. So stay tuned for that because we're going to be spilling our guts about our thoughts on Poco
once
F6
you've actually got it in hand.
It's going to be cool. It's going to be cool.
Yeah.
Speaking of, there's an entire other lineup of phones that we have been expecting that are kind of semi-exciting. The Vivo X series, to fill you in, Judy, is kind of the photography side. You've done the V series, right? Like me, right?
Yes,
and the V series is that kind of hit and miss. Last set of models weren't that good. The V30, the Pro that I have right now, I'm very impressed with the quality of the camera on that and everything.
Caleb on our site just reviewed it, and he was blown away, absolutely blown away by how good the cameras were. But it doesn't work here. So
yeah,
it's
it doesn't really work.
And
there.
It's Asian markets only, correct?
Yeah.
So
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I don't know. There's so many amazing phones out there, so many varied phones that it really feels like, especially in the United States with major carriers, not allowing certain phones on their networks for whatever reason.
I know it's such a loaded.
It's just hard, for us because we want to use something new and exciting and different, maybe not just be on something that everyone else is using. And we can't even get service. So it's like, okay, well, it's a great
my
phone,
solution to that is I would suggest, folks, little segue, couple of segues in the middle of the podcast here. Number one, Mint Mobile is our sponsor on this show, and Mint Mobile is one of my regular sponsors. If you are in a situation where you want to try a Chinese phone and you're worried it's not going to work with your carrier, maybe you're on Verizon or AT&T sometimes turns people's SIMs off when they use phones that are weird because they don't support VoLTE, for example. So guess what? $15, I think, is their deal right now for like, a month for like unlimited data for 3 months. And then there's another deal after that. So check out the link in the description and, maybe get a little SIM. Like I'll give you an example. They gave me a SIM for a while to use. And then eventually they said, you have to pay your own way. I spent $200 a year on my Mint Mobile SIM, a year. And for testing, it's perfect. Like I get something like 15 gigs of data a month. and I can roam in Canada. Like, it's great. So my point is, if you have, and that works with the Chinese phones because it's based on T-Mobile, right? So like,
Right.
they don't care what phone you use and they just work. So if you want to ever get a phone like that, don't make it your daily driver again because like, you're not going to get the band support in some parts of the country, even on T-Mobile, you're not going to get signal, right? Basically, it's not that the phone's going to boot you off the network. It's just you're not going to have signal. But in most urban and suburban places, I took the V30 with me to like New Orleans, for example, and it worked just fine. So, the X series here is kind of their flagship series. And, every year we've got the Oppo Find X something series, right? That is like the camera flagship. Then we have the Xiaomi numbered series. That's like the camera flagship, like right now, the 14 Ultra, right? And then you have, and the one that's always unobtainium for us reviewers is the freaking Vivo X series. And, the X100 and 100 Pro came out in the fall, right around the time of the MediaTek Summit, with the 9300 from MediaTek on there. There's the first phones with it. And the Pro was really well received by a lot of the Asian media, like Ben Sin, who's based in Hong Kong and LA.
Yes, good guy.
Really loves that camera system, and I'm very jealous. And like Anshel, I think, borrowed one for a while and thought it was really amazing. So it's kind of like, anything you can't get your hands on, you kind of Jones, you want it, right? So the X series for me is kind of like that. And so what was weird is in the past, they've always done like a Pro Plus. So they do like a regular, a Pro, and a Pro Plus. And this year, there's the regular and the Pro, both with Dimensity 9300. And generally, the Pro Plus is always the Qualcomm one. So you'd expect it to be the 8 Gen 3, right? And nothing, crickets. And then this past week, they gave us an X100 Ultra, which takes the X100 Pro camera system, cranks it up to 11, and adds a Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 to the party. And again, just like the Pro, only available in China. Not just Asia, China. So if you are jonesing for the unobtainium, this is the phone for you. But more importantly, you can import it. So for example, Trinity Electronics in Hong Kong is one of the most well-known importers. You can ping them and they will get you any phone sold in China. They can get pretty much overnight to Hong Kong, which means to you in a few days via FedEx or UPS. And, the prices are not ridiculous. They don't charge your arm or leg for that. So again, the problem with Chinese phones, band support is going to be an issue. But also the V30 that we had was a global model, so it had the Google Play stuff. You'll have to manually install the Google Play stuff, which
isn't that hard.
It's not hard, but for somebody who doesn't know what's going on, it's a hassle.
Yeah.
But Trinity will offer to do it for you. So if you let them crack the box open,
service.
Which is really nice.
Yeah.
But anyway, so the X100 is out, the Ultra, and I think that's going to be the next, forbidden
200 megapixel periscope.
I mean, that's the thing. That's the first. Like, and did you see the f-stop on that? Like, just
I did not. What is it?
It's like ridiculously like wide aperture for a 200 megapixel sensor.
Okay. F over 2.67 aperture.
85
millimeter equivalent focal. Yeah.
For like is it a 5x periscope? That's ridiculous.
Yeah, that'll
like wow.
Like you said, unobtainium, but how much fun would it be to play with that? So periscope gets up to 3.7 optical zoom.
Oh, it's 3.7. But even that, 3.7 at that f-stop is unheard of, especially with 200 megapixels. You're going to be able to pixel bin like twice, basically. So you'll be able to crop and then crop again and still be lossless.
Amazing.
So 3.7 times 4 magnification. That's 4x4, 16. So you'll be able to zoom to about 15x with lossless pixels, which is...
Yeah, and then a 50 megapixel main camera.
And that's the same one as on the Pro. It's the 1-inch sensor that's in the Oppo and the Xiaomi as well. It's a really delightful camera system. So
yeah, no, this looks
very
fantastic.
Excited. But
how much is this one going to cost?
No, look at that. The price is about $1,200 or $1,100 for the higher end one, and like $9,000 for the like lesser trim, which is just RAM and storage differences, right?
$1,100 for a 1 terabyte storage, though. That's like,
It's 1 terabyte, yeah.
yeah.
That's not bad. I mean,
No,
that's
it's
China
not.
pricing, right? Remember China?
Sure.
Everything's subsidized by apps and stuff. There's always so much bloatware. But Vivo wasn't happy enough with that. They said, you know what? We're going to pull a Xiaomi here. Do you know how Xiaomi does the 14 series right now? That's the flagship series. But in the fall, they're going to do a T model, right? 14T. Like there was a 13T and a 12T and 11T.
Sounds like
and it's kind of like
OnePlus's playbook.
Yeah, it's a TikTok cycle. It's like exactly like the OnePlus 12Rs to the OnePlus 12, or the previously the OnePlus 10T was to the 10,
8T,
right?
all of them,
Like, that's so funny to me because it's like the playbook is so predictable, but so far Vivo has never done that. Like they've never had like an S version of their X series. And so now they have this kind of slightly more affordable. They cut a few corners here and there. Like Xiaomi generally uses plastic frames instead of metal frames on these phones and, detunes the camera a little bit. And I think we're going to see the same here with the X100s series. So be prepared for those of you who don't want to spend nearly as much money. And here's what's exciting. These are the first phones with a Dimensity 9300 Plus chipset that was announced, like last week. I think we covered it on the podcast.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So there you go. That's another one to look out for.
Should be good.
And also, interestingly, these don't have curved screens. So the X series always had the very signature BBK group, waterfall, slight curve on the edge. This is very much like an iPhone, flat screen.
Like, give me the flat screen, please. Yes.
I like the flat screen, but I am a little butthurt that
not you
that everyone is going to copy the iPhone. Like even the Pixel, like the 8A has such round corners, and it's like the round corners and the flat edges. I'm like,
okay, but Miriam, stop for a second. Think back to whenever curved edges were first introduced to phones. I believe like Samsung slapped out their edge, and then
the Note
it was
edge, yeah.
Yes, and then it was okay. We can do a curved bezel, and it was a big deal to have this curved glass because it was more expensive to produce. So if you saw a curved glass display, you knew it was an expensive phone. It's very 2000s is how it feels now. The flat screens, I mean, it's just there's so much easier.
I don't mind the flat screens. In fact, I would say I prefer the flat screens, although I do have to say that the curved edges are really nice for gestures. Like
I have so many missed, like I'll be trying to move something to another screen and a curved edge. It's like it'll drop it and it's just, give me a flat screen.
So, the best solution here is what Xiaomi did with the 14 Ultra, where, and Huawei does this for their flagships too, where it's a flat screen, but the very edge of the screen, that's bezel part, has a curve in 4 directions. And it
looks nice and it feels nice, good. Yes.
And it feels so good for gestures. So, but I'm not so much butthurt about the flat screen. I'm more butthurt about, I love this expression. I'm just annoyed. God damn it. I'm annoyed with the slab sides. Like, why do we need slab sides? Why is everything trying to copy the iPhone? Because honestly, I look, here's the thing. The problem I have is the iPhone is not a very attractive phone. I don't think there's much love or care in the iPhone's design at this stage. There was a time, I give you examples. iPhone 4, iconic, legendary. iPhone 5 kind of diluted it by going to aluminum instead of stainless steel. Then, the entire rounded edge series, like the 6, 7, 8.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Boring. But then they did the iPhone X.
The 10, yeah.
Yeah, they did the 10. And that was just amazing. That was, again, a radical change. Of course, the notch was a little much, but now they have the dynamic island. But if you look at an iPhone Pro from basically the 11 onward, it's hard to tell them apart. And Samsung, you could argue, has the same problem to some extent. But I don't know. I feel like, is this something you need to copy?
Okay, well, hold on for 1 second, though. Let's talk about cars for 1 second. I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Do you remember back in, let's say, the 80s, every new car that came out looked completely different, it seemed, than the one before. And I'm talking predominantly about US automaker cars. They made such a big deal to where, like, if you didn't get a new car within a year or two, your car looked dated. Okay?
That's right. Yeah.
But then there were German vehicles and Italian vehicles where they kept the same design style. So if
Design
you saw
language.
one, you'd be like, oh, that's a beautiful car. And you wouldn't be like, but it's 5 years old. You'd just be like, oh, it's a beautiful car. And so in a way, just because of a lot of times, you may have a kid who gets an iPhone, let's say, and maybe the other kid's getting a brand new one. If they're keeping kind of the same design language, that may also actually maybe help a little bit with some of the way, kids can be like, oh, you have the old phone. So I'm kind of glad that and I know this is like a very specific reason, but I'm kind of glad they're not being like, okay, so between the 14 and the 15, let's say, appearance wise, not a lot of difference, right? But differences on the inside. But if you're like with a group of friends and one of them has a 15 and one has a 14, then we're going to be like, oh, you have a 14,
Yeah, no, I think you make a very good argument. I cannot disagree with you. Porsche 911 is a poster child of that. Like they all kind of look the same. They're timeless.
Absolutely.
And, but I have my counterpoint to that is that the 911 is a car and you can drive a 20-year-old 911. It still works perfectly fine.
I get it.
Like,
but hold on a second.
iPhone,
not everybody changes phones every year, though. A lot of people want to be able to hold on to them.
In 5 years, that phone's going to be in the landfill or recycled, right?
Hopefully
5 years.
recycled.
5, 6 years, 7 years even. Whereas a 911, the 40-year-old 911s are still around.
100%, yes.
So I get your point, but I feel like I'm okay that maybe we do 2 or 3 generations in a row. But like I feel right now, like the iPhone needs a refresh, a design. Like, we went from the 4 and 5 to these rounded cornered bigger phones to the ones with the notch to now we have, and the slab sides. And, we got the dynamic island, but now maybe can we go somewhere else? What
got
about
titanium this year? What do you want?
Yeah, but I don't have it with me because I thought I was wearing I'm wearing my PJs, so I don't have my pants on. But if I had my pants on, I would have my red Magic. Well, it's 10 o'clock or 11 now.
Oh my God.
If I had my pants on me, I'd have my red Magic 9 Pro that I'm reviewing for Hot Hardware right now. And, that's an extreme case of what the Samsung Ultra used to look like, super rectangular. But like, why doesn't Apple do that? Like, why does Apple do like a completely different design direction? I don't understand.
I would like to see a purely rectangular, like I stuck my iPhone 14 and I haven't done it with my 15, but I stuck it in one of the square cases. You know what I'm talking about? It looks like a perfect rectangle.
Are so awesome. I know.
Yes. I love how they feel in hand. I love how it looks. And people be like, what phone is that? Even though it was obviously an iPhone, if you saw the back, they were like, what phone is that? I love like the new Samsung Ultra. It's
rectangular iPhone.
Yes.
I'm calling it now. That's what we want.
Beautiful. And so, yes, if they were to do that, I would be like, ooh. So yeah, okay, I would get excited about that. And then everybody would say they're copying Samsung. So I mean, they can't win.
Well,
but I wish they'd do it.
Samsung's moved away from that a little bit, except for the Ultra.
Well,
right?
not on the Ultra.
That's true.
So yeah, and the Ultra I think looks stunning. So yeah,
it's a pretty good phone. I agree. Of all the Samsungs, it's probably my favorite. But anyway, GPT 4o.
Oh, -4. And is it a 0 or a O?
It's an O.
Okay.
It stands for Omni.
Oh, Omni, yes.
And the idea is that it's a multimodal system, so it can do text, voice, image, content generation all in one. So it's not just like one thing. And, this is a good way to wrap up, I think, because we're going back to our AI rant from earlier. Like, here's what bothers me, okay? Like, have you seen what Altman tweeted recently? The guy, the CEO of OpenAI. So
what did he tweet recently?
Well, somebody said, like, the demos that they showed said, those demos look like the movie Her.
Right.
And his response, and also a ton of other people's responses was, isn't that amazing? And I'm like, did you not understand the assignment? That was a dystopian movie. Like, it was not supposed to be a good thing.
So somebody watched this movie and got inspired and was like, oh, we can make sure nobody's ever lonely because they're going to have a her.
Like, this
Okay,
is what I'm
so-
talking about, Silicon Valley being like completely out on left field right now.
Right.
Like, it didn't used to be so disconnected from reality because these people live in a bubble of like money and just don't know what the hell the rest of the world is up to.
But the accessibility features that this
Oh, yeah.
GPT-4o will provide might be helpful for those
And you
with
know what?
disabilities.
That's the one thing on the R1 that's worked out really well so far is if I point the camera at something and tell it to describe it, it's really good. But I'm not, sight impaired. So like for me, it's not that much value because
Right.
like, if I think for some things it's nice. Like you point at a car, maybe you're traveling abroad, you're not used to cars abroad, and you point it out and you say, what kind of car is that? And it'll tell you, great, that's nice. But I'm like thinking, it's not a use case that I find particularly compelling, especially when Google Lens can do the same or could.
Right.
I don't know if it's changed now with the AI stuff, but it could do the thing without AI before. So like, you know what I'm saying?
Well, and I mean, God, I use that for everything. Like, what plant is this? Because I love house plants. What is this plant, so that I know what to look for, or even what is this dog? And that's one of the things that I do like about Google Lens. So I mean, if you can point your phone at something and use Chat GPT-4o or GPT-4o, it's not chat anymore, is it?
Yeah, it's
and
not
say,
chat because it's doing other stuff.
tell me what I'm looking at. It's like, or what are you looking at? Type thing. It's like, I can see where that might have some value. And again, especially for people who are challenged in certain areas, sure. But for the average user, it kind of just seems like ooh, look what I can do. Do you remember Stuart? Look what I can do.
yeah, basically.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know it, but if it helps a couple thousand people having that feature,
look, I'm not opposed to it. I'm just opposed to like this whole like you're creating technology and you don't really understand the ramifications of what you're doing. Like it's like we talked about it last week, right? On the show, the Apple ad and how it was like read the room, right? Like the ad for the iPad where they crushed everything in the hydraulic press. Like it's like this is what I'm saying. Like when this CEO of billionaire of a company that's making AI products responds to you saying, hey, this looks like a lot like her, and says, isn't that great? Like, again, you did not get the movie, and that means you don't get how badly this could go, right? Like, and I don't want to sound like a Luddite. Like, I know a lot of your audience is going to be like, but Miriam, aren't you loving tech? Yes, I love tech, and I believe in tech, and I believe actually in AI. I think AI will improve, and I think AI will be useful to us. And I think that the problem we're having right now is that the companies making AI products are not thinking about the consequences of what they're doing. They're not thinking about the ethical issues around what they're doing. They're not thinking about things like we're ripping off artists without, giving them money. They're not thinking about things like people are going to lose their jobs. And you know what? That's inevitable. Technology has made people lose their jobs forever now.
Yes.
But the thing is, this is going to be at such an accelerated rate that it's going to disrupt society and culture in a major way, and not for the better, because people are going to be cranky and upset. And, not just a few people, it's going to be a ton of people. And so I don't have the solutions. I'm not saying like, we should stop this stuff. I'm just saying like we should be a little more thoughtful about how we do it. And, like, I don't want to get political, but for me, like, I think the solution long term, if we want AI and robots to do a lot of the jobs we do, is to, have universal income for everyone. Everybody gets money every month.
Right. And AI's doing all the work. Thank you.
From those rich people who are not right now sharing it. As I said earlier, they're not funding the orgs and the shelters for women and the local artists.
Right.
Like, I think this is the problem. And that's why it makes me cranky, because like I'm particularly cranky because I love technology so much. I want us to advance. I want us to go forward, but we can't just do it without thinking about what we're doing. Like, it's like using AI for weapons. Like, think about it. The AI half the time is right, half the time is wrong. How could that be a good idea?
Yeah, when you're talking about live human beings being decimated, sure.
We already make errors in wars all the time. It's
all
for the
time.
whole history of wars we've made errors,
Right.
killing, friendly fire, whatever you want to call it, collateral damage. And I accept that. Like, I'm not like optimist pie in the sky person, but I still feel like as technologists, as engineers, as nerds, as people who are believing in science, that we should be mindful of our impact. Like the whole Oppenheimer movie was about that. Like how
Right.
tortured he was about, like they all were, but they understood they had to do the thing they had to do because the alternative was worse, right? But at the same time, they unleashed a monster that they couldn't put back in, right? And, you know, some of you who are listening are old enough to remember, like when I was a kid, nuclear war was a real thing we were all really worried about. Like, you
Drills
know,
in schools. Yeah.
I know. You can't just put a blind eye to the fact that technology disrupts. And that's a good thing, but it's also a very bad thing if not done right.
I think that if it ends up isolating people because they don't need to interact with actual human beings anymore, they can now talk to their friend on their phone.
Yeah.
That's a bad thing. I think that if it winds up making people en masse lose their life's work because it's just been stolen to give a snappy answer in a search, I think that's a bad thing. There has to be a balance. And I mean, I can see where, you know, we've already talked about the benefits to a quick search. But I mean, you know, I understand that there are people who are antisocial or who are very isolated, and having a chat friend, basically, I can see that, you know, there might be a benefit in some ways.
There's therapeutical benefits here that we can
but if
about.
it ends up making people ultimately feel more isolated or feel more just alone, you know, then we need to be very responsible with this. So,
well, let's end on this note, on this very philosophical note. Judy, I want you to tell folks where they can find you on the internet, all the awesome things you do, social media handles, all that good stuff.
GearDiary.com, and Instagram is @GearDiary. And just look for Gear Diary. You'll find me.
And go read the website. And I write reviews there sometimes too. So there you go.
Not often enough. We love you.
No.
Thank you so much for having me, Miriam.
Absolutely. Folks, you know where to find me on the internet. I'm at Tankgirl, TNKGRL, like the comic book character. And you know where to find me on all the social platforms. I'm on Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I'm on Blue Sky. I'm on Facebook. You know, just find me and add me. And then, of course, the podcast lives at mobiletechpodcast.com. We're on all the major podcasting apps and platforms. Please subscribe. And then if your app lets you rate or review the show, please do that and tell people how you feel so that hopefully we'll get more subscribers and spread the word. You know, it's a good thing. There's also a YouTube channel if you want to watch some videos monthly, like unboxings or reviews, that kind of thing. I got some content there for you for free. So subscribe. You know how YouTube works. Like, tell your friends, comment, click the bell, all that stuff. And then, there's a Patreon. And the Patreon gets you the podcast a day usually earlier than the audio version. And you get to see us on video in person. Sometimes we show phones. If I could have reached for my Red Magic 9
Put a face
Pro.
to that voice.
You put a face to that voice, you see us interact. Sometimes there's bloopers and I leave them in. Sometimes we go overtime and I leave that in. So you get extra content for sure. And it's $5 a month. So consider helping me out on Patreon. Patreon.com/Tankgirl. That's patreon.com/TNKGRL. And if you don't like Patreon, you want to help me another way, there's a PayPal link in the show notes. Just click through to that. Give me a coffee or something, buy me something for $5
in
or
other
whatever
words,
it is.
Support original content creators.
Exactly. Because, you know, we do this for the love of you guys, like for the love of our audience and for the love of technology and for the passion that we have in our jobs. So
yes,
consider helping me, consider helping Judy, and also consider helping my sponsor, Mint Mobile. You know I review a lot of phones, so I'm constantly juggling multiple devices. While that's fun, it also means I'm spending a lot of money for wireless service on multiple SIMs. Thankfully, there's Mint Mobile, and that's who I'm teaming up with for today's podcast. If you want to save money on your wireless service, switch to Mint Mobile. You've probably seen the Mint Mobile ads featuring Ryan Reynolds, but let me quickly tell you how fantastic their service is, especially for tech-savvy early adopters like us. Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for as low as $15 a month, and you don't have to sacrifice any coverage, speed, or data. They're built on the nation's largest 5G network. They keep costs low because they sell direct to you online. They cut out the retail stores and salespeople. Why should you pay more than you have to for access to the same network? In my experience testing phones, Mint Mobile delivers the same data speeds and call quality as the big three for a fraction of the cost. Switching to Mint is super easy. Thanks to their eSIMs, you can sign up and activate immediately right on your phone from the comfort of your home. No more standing around waiting in line at a big wireless store. You can keep your current devices and phone number and easily switch services. And if your phone isn't eSIM compatible, Mint will ship you a new SIM card free of charge. The whole process only takes 15 minutes, and if you get stuck, Mint has a great customer service team to get you through it. All Mint Mobile plans include unlimited nationwide talk and text, plus lightning-fast 5G and free mobile hotspot. Mint will show you how much data you use each month and recommend plans that save you money. Mint also offers a modern family plan that lets you set up a super affordable family plan with as little as 2 lines. Use my link, mintmobile.com/mobiletech, to get premium wireless starting at $15 a month. Stop paying more than you need on your wireless bill and start saving big with Mint Mobile. And Judy, I want to thank you for being my guest yet again. Thanks so much for coming.
Miriam, thank you for having me. It's always so much fun.
Absolutely. We'll have you on the future again. And folks, we'll have another show next week with Sam Byford, so stay tuned for that. Until then, cheers, everybody.
This has been the Mobile Tech Podcast with Tank Girl, proudly presented by worldpodcasts.com. You can visit us online at mobiletechpodcast.com.